Yeah.
Why does it look like all fuzzy? Can you like?
No, it's just 7 o'clock.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the
Committee of the whole meeting for Monday, August 23rd, 2021. First thing up we have is Carly Boos from the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio with a presentation for us.
Thank you, and good evening. So I am Carly. I'm the Executive Director at the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. If you're not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit organization. We are also a membership group. We have 25 members, and we're really intentional about creating a membership that is kind of representative of all housing interests. So we have members who work very hardcore in home ownership issues and making sure that people have a path to home ownership, those who serve renters, those who are involved in the homeless system. And we also want to make sure that some of the industry side is represented in our views as well. So we do work with financiers and investors, syndicators, and those who are on more of the business end of the housing world. Our work in Central Ohio is really focused around research, where we are unabashed data nerds. We like to have a really good hyper-local understanding of what's happening in the housing market. And then we use that to inform solutions and strategies. And we work very closely with local governments and nonprofits as they're crafting what they want to do in response to the housing crisis to make sure that they've got the tools and the partners to lean on. And I can talk a little bit more about some of the cool projects that we have in the works now, but we are also always open to ideas and new partnerships and collaborations.
Carly, could you speak a little bit more into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Absolutely.
You can move it towards you if it helps. Thank you.
It does. I'm having clicker troubles, I think. So is it possible to ask if you could help me advance the slide?
Let's go here. Carly, hold on 1 second. We have an app and able to see here without twisting. If I can pull that up.
Okay.
What app?
This guy.
Oh. Okay.
And while you're getting situated, I just like to root these conversations in kind of some shared definitions because I think it helps with communication. And what is going to be very, very unsatisfying is there is no good universal definition for affordable housing. Everybody who's in this space uses something different. Governments use different things than nonprofit, and I think that what people feel on the ground is very different from some of the lingo that we use. The most commonly accepted definition of affordable housing is a housing payment that doesn't exceed 30% of whatever your own personal income is, which makes sense, right? Because the millionaire and the waitress shouldn't be held to the same standard. It has that nice personalized context. When it comes to programs that deal with affordable housing, some of the most common brackets are listed up on that screen. When you're looking at 100 to 120% AMI, that's what's often called workforce housing. It's usually home ownership strategies. 60 to 80% is also sometimes called workforce housing. It's kind of that squishy middle, sometimes called affordable housing. And then 30% of AMI is what is usually referred to as households that are extremely low income. One of the things that I added to this slide, if you want to look closely, is on the far right. I put some example jobs because I think that helps kind of break down who is in what category. Generally speaking, at 30% AMI, you're looking at pensioners, seniors who are on fixed income, and minimum wage workers. At 60% AMI, you're talking about blue-collar households, and at 80 to 100, you're into white-collar households.
Can I ask a question, or I can wait?
No, please.
Are these national stats? Are they regional stats? Are they Columbus stats? Are they Gahanna stats?
These are all Franklin County,
Franklin County.
and these are based on a 2-bedroom home. So you assume mom, dad, and kid. So I'm getting the green light flashing at me, but it is not advancing. Could I ask you to nudge me forward, please? Why we have an affordable housing problem in Franklin County is literally the opposite of rocket science. What it takes to build a house right now, best case scenario is about $220,000 in Franklin County dollars. Most Franklin County residents can't afford to pay that. When you stretch $220,000 out over a 30-year mortgage or over a lease, we just don't have the income to sustain that. So for example, right now, average home sales in Franklin County are about $316,000. I pulled up Gahanna's data earlier this morning, very, very close to that number. Average sales are about $303,000. So if you add the standard interest rate, the standard tax, the standard insurance to that, you're spitting out an average monthly payment to buy that house somewhere in the $2,200 range. That's very unaffordable for most of our families. You've got to earn about 90 grand a year to make those numbers work without overstretching your budget. To flip that analysis, if you're looking at at a minimum wage household, they would have to work 170 hours every week, 52 weeks a year, just to afford that average Central Ohio house, which is about 4.5 jobs just to sustain their housing payment. We have a couple package solutions to deal with this, and this is a way glazing over of the complexity here. But generally, if you have a developer and they want to build a house, and it's going to be maybe $300,000 is what the architect spits back, they can do a couple things to lower those costs to make it more affordable to the average family. The first is just plain old value engineering. Get rid of the marble countertop, get rid of the pool, get rid of the balcony, just take out the bells and whistles, and that's how you find yourself in about that 120 AMI category. That's what the standard white-collar worker, folks like me, can tend to earn. I have a beautiful, very old house in Reynoldsburg because of value engineering. It's smaller than what you will find in most communities, but it fits for our family. To go lower down and to reach people who need more help, you can switch out your debt. Normally, if you're going to build an apartment building, you're going to build a house, that's pretty speculative. The bank is going to charge you a hell of an interest rate to do that. But you can go to a philanthropic lender, and maybe they'll cut you a deal, and they'll give you a 3% interest rate, and you can pass those savings on to your homeowner or to your tenant. That's kind of the next easiest rung down the ladder. The next two options get harder and more bureaucratic and much, 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 much rarer. The next couple options we have nowhere near of in Franklin County, in Gahanna, in Columbus, or in the US. The first is a construction offset. Typically what that looks like is a state tax credit. The low-income housing tax credit is the biggest program we have in this category. And really, it just infuses equity into the project in exchange for affordability commitments. Hey, I'll give you $7 million if you agree not to raise rent for the next 30 years. That can get you about 60% AMI. So those three combined is what you need just to serve a middle-income household here in Franklin County, our neighbors. To go further down the ladder, you need to pair all of those up with a tenant subsidy. And the most common subsidy is one that I'm betting all of you guys use. I certainly use it. It's the mortgage interest tax deduction. The mortgage interest deduction that you take on your taxes every year, that is by far and away the largest subsidy we have in this country. It is bigger than the entire budget of HUD, the USDA, and the Veterans Administration combined. Other common subsidies in this category are Section 8 vouchers and down payment assistance programs for homeowners. So taking that context and applying it to where we are in Franklin County today, we have a problem. We have, before COVID-19, 54,000 of our households were paying more than half of their income towards their housing cost. And I said earlier, 30% is a nice, healthy range. 30% is what we know from research is sustainable. When you are paying more than half of your income towards housing, we tend to think that you are making life and death decisions every day. You are figuring out, am I going to buy my medicine or am I going to pay my rent? Am I going to make my kid a healthy meal and spend time helping them with their homework tonight? Or am I going to hit McDonald's and pull an extra shift to cover the mortgage? Those are monthly considerations for families who are housing cost burdened. And our problem is getting worse rather than better. According to the BIA, we should be building about 14,000 houses a year just to bake our crisis in where it is today. Because of population growth, if we're not building 14,000 a year, we're losing ground. Most years we're building about 8,000. Last year was our high water mark because of some deals that were in the pipe before the coronavirus, and we only grazed 11,000. So even in our best year, we're not hitting the bare minimum. And as a result, for every 100 extremely low-income households we have in the county, only 32 of them have a house that they can afford. And in Gahanna, in particular, just to afford a plain old, standard, modest, two-bedroom apartment, you need to earn $23 per hour. I've got the $18 an hour number memorized because that's Franklin County, but I had to pull Gahanna up. I'm gonna flub it sometimes. $23 an hour. And for reference, of Ohio's 10 most common jobs, only one of them pays anywhere near that range, and that is the registered nurse. Vacancy rate, I wanted to pull a little bit of localized data so that I could kind of figure out what was happening here in Gahanna before coming to speak with you. Your vacancy rate is 4.3%. That is terrifying. That means that you essentially have 0% vacancy. Anything under 5% means that that unit is only open long enough to clean it, paint it, and stick it back up on the market, and it re-rents right away. That is an incredibly, terrifyingly tight market. The renter cost burden, I wanted to pull that number as well. In Franklin County, about 44% of our renter households are cost burdened. A little bit better in Gahanna, but not enough to write home about. You're still looking at about a 37% cost burden rate. So 2 out of 5 of your tenants are paying more than they can just to afford their rent. Overall, from the county, we are in a pretty dangerous position. If you look at the 2019 census data and you compare it to the 2017 to 2019, so the last 2 years before the pandemic, we lost 20,000 units that rented for under $900 a month. And we gained about 35,000 that rent over that. So what that means is they probably weren't demolished, they weren't torn down, they just raised their rents. So we still have the stock, but we don't have the access. I cite that 54,000 cost burden number a lot because it's a really good bellwether for housing security in a region. But I do have to note that that top line number conceals a lot of inequity in it. And for instance, in Franklin County, black-headed households are 55% likely to be cost burdened compared to 43% for their white counterparts. And I've got a whole slide deck that can go into the racial inequities in our housing market in more depth. But today I just kind of wanted to stick to the bigger picture at play. And I also want to talk about how COVID has impacted all of this because it is, again, quite alarming for people who are working in this sector. About a year ago, there was a national analysis firm called Stout, really well recognized. They do a lot of work around data crunching generally, and they predicted that COVID would ultimately result in 400,000 evictions in Ohio. That would be a 700% increase over our pre-COVID rate, so pretty scary stuff. But that was a year ago. We have been watching US Census Bureau numbers come out since then, which are published just about weekly. And as of the last week of July, 28% of Ohio renters didn't think that they were going to cover their August rent. So about 1 in 3. If you extrapolate that out, that's almost 400,000. And as a research nerd, when I say 2 or 3 or 4 different formulas all shooting out the same prediction and self-verifying each other, that really worries me because it makes me think that that 400,000 number was not pie in the sky, fear-mongering. That's what we're staring down right now. The blue bars you see at the bottom here, that's been our weekly eviction filing rate in Franklin County since COVID-19 started. And that green line that cuts across them is what our pre-COVID rate was. So you can see how many weeks in this last year or so we've been cusping over. And I'll show you that same data in a different visualization. Don't worry too much about the radical spikes. That's because week-to-week eviction filings are always radical. Landlords file evictions the 3rd week, not the 1st week, because you've got a grace period. So the spikes don't worry me. It's the trend line. It's that trajectory that's shooting up and continuing to go up. And this is happening against the backdrop of a country where we've had an eviction moratorium. So my question is, why isn't this 0 across the board? And now that the moratorium is gone, is this going to get better or worse? And I think that's a relatively obvious answer for those of us who are seeing the data come down the pipe on what the landlord's attorneys are holding and getting ready to drop onto the court. One last slide on eviction, which is eviction filings in Franklin County by zip code. For context, there's about 70 zip codes in Franklin County right now. I think there's 69 last time I checked. The 43230 zip code, which is what I've kind of been using as a proxy for all of Gahanna, I know you've got some other codes in there, is the 16th largest eviction filer in the county. Certainly not in the worst case, but not where I would want to be sitting either. And I say all of that not to be super gloomy, because thanks to federal stimulus work, thanks to federal relief packages, we have the money here in Franklin County to stop every single one of these evictions. So I will say that if you know friends, relatives, randos on social media, please share the link to the Impact Hope Fund because we've got the money to help them out of this situation. And I will make a really important observation too, which is that this fund is not exclusively for tenants, it is for landlords. So if you have friends and neighbors who have rental portfolios and they have not been able to receive payments, landlords should absolutely submit because we strongly believe that Tenants should not lose their home because of a disease, nor should business owners lose their income. And we've got the resources to stop that. Very quickly in passing, I will say one of the challenges, the biggest challenge in my estimate that we have with the relief funds right now is that nobody knows about them. Only about 40% of tenants know that it's out there, only about 60% of landlords. And that's a number that we need to fix. So any help you can give circulating on Facebook would be wonderful and very much appreciated. I don't want to go into homeowner issues right now too awful much because it's been a very different regulatory landscape at the federal level. But I will say this is the most recent data I have, and again, this is Gahanna specific, on the number of mortgage loans that are in forbearance. And what that means is that is a homeowner who is in trouble, and they have raised their hand, and they've told their mortgage company, guys, I need help, and they're working together on a solution, and payments are paused in the meantime. And the second chart is those who are in default. Borrowers who are obviously troubled but have not been able to receive help. And this is what has me concerned. There is a data lag on this. I only have data going back to April, but you can see that the number who are in forbearance is going down, while the number who are in default is going up, which means borrowers are falling out of forbearance without a solution to get themselves the help they need. And that is exactly the same kind of trend we saw before the Great Recession 10 years ago. I'm not going to talk about developer costs too awful much because I think there's more interesting things. No offense, developers, I love you. But I will say very quickly in passing that of our members, those who develop affordable housing, every single one of them saw their costs go through the roof this year. And in particular, half of them saw their costs go up at least 16%. That is with no new funding streams to address those increased costs, which largely come from supply shortages and in particular lumber. What that means is more expenses with the same amount of dollars means we get to build fewer homes, which is something that will linger with us for many, many years. Again, I'm not trying to be a bummer because I am, in general, quite an optimistic person, and I will note that every national crisis we've ever had in this country has been pulled out and set straight because of housing. Getting serious about housing in the Great Recession and passing the TARP program was what pulled us out of that. The great construction boom coming out of World War II is what got us out of that, as did interest rate reform coming out of the S&L crisis in the 80s. And that is because housing is the most significant, most hyper-local stimulus you can have. You build your homes local with local labor, local vendors, local suppliers, and ultimately you create a product that stays local and pays taxes local. So all of that stimulus money gets to stay in your community and circulate for the greater good. As far as some of the projects that AHACO is working on and that we're excited to see move forward, obviously looking at how we can use some of these federal stimulus dollars, in particular the super flexible Treasury ARP funds, to build that housing recovery is something we're exploring really closely. We've run a bunch of different formulas and models that project what income revenue streams look like, what tax revenue streams look like, and what leverage is available to essentially magnify that opportunity. We are also very, very firm believers in the fact that housing is a platform for economic mobility. It's the give a man a fish sort of argument. We can certainly give you affordable housing, and that's wonderful, and it stops you from being homeless, and it has an impact on your health and your community's health. But if we can use housing as the foundation to get you a better job and to keep you stable and self-sustaining in the long run, much better. One of the projects that we have right now that I'm kind of spilling the beans on a little bit, because technically we're not getting funding for it until tomorrow, is something called Resiliency Bridge. We found that coming out of COVID-19, there were a lot of folks who are workforce insecure, that during COVID-19, they were waiters, they were waitresses, they were baggers at a grocery store, they were minimum wage workers, and they lost their income. But regardless of whether COVID-19 happened, those were the same jobs that were at risk of automation in the long term as well. So whether it was this crisis or was the next one, those jobs were on the line. But those workers cannot go back to school, because to stop working and dedicate yourself to your studies means that you can't pay your rent, means eviction, means losing your kids. It means that they had no good option. So our new Resiliency Bridge program, which officially we're not launching until September, will provide your housing costs. We'll provide wraparound services in exchange for you going a workforce certification program that is high pay, high demand in the local market, which helps you as a family sustain your housing costs and sustain your living. And it also makes sure that we're attracting the kind of employers that we need in Franklin County for our economic development goals as well. Very, very quickly, some of the other projects that we're excited to work on this year, we're being very intentional about the kind of actions we can take to close the black-white homeownership gap, and that kind of justice orientation permeates throughout our work. We are also very invested in the source of income ordinance work that is going on here in Central Ohio. Bexley, I'm sure you've heard, was one of the first jurisdictions in Central Ohio to accept this and to kind of lead on this issue. But it's a protection that's available for 50% of residents in the country. It's just that Ohio is lacking behind some of those other leaders. So what we do is we do a lot of research on that, and in fact, I think show you some data that we have showing the scale of the problem, which is that most landlords refuse to accept certain kinds of income from tenants, and we know that those income kinds tend to disadvantage already vulnerable populations. So most landlords do not accept Social Security income, which we know benefits disabled and blind individuals. Most landlords do not accept child support income, which obviously benefits families with children, but also primarily women-headed households. And most don't accept rental assistance of any variety whatsoever, which we know has an extremely disproportionate impact on veterans as well as households of color. Not going to go into it too much, but in the city of Columbus in particular, we're really interested in what's happening with the zoning reform process because it's an opportunity to build affordable housing without actually having to spend money. We can just right-size our zoning standards, right-size our housing code standards to meet what the market is already demanding, and we can build affordability quite naturally. So I believe that is my 20 minutes, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to speak. I probably would have stood up and gave the same speech to my husband at home because I really do love this. So I'm glad that there were people here to listen who are not rolling their eyes openly at me. But thank you. And I'm always happy and can be reached at any of those methods to talk more. Are there any questions I can answer?
Yeah, thank you so much for stopping out. Two questions. The first one is, could you tell us a little bit about the members of AHACO and who those organizations are? And then the second question is a little bit more specific to the slide on source of income protection. The data, is that Franklin County or Ohio specific?
So that data is Franklin County. It was done by Franklin County's Department of Justice Policy and Programs in consultation with the Legal Aid Society of Columbus and the Ohio Housing Finance Agency.
Okay, thank you.
And then our membership, I said we've got 25 members, and they really do come from all walks of housing life. So we have those that are nonprofit community-based groups like Homeport, like Homes on the Hill. We have those that are for-profit developers like NRP Group and Woda Cooper. We have those that work in the homeless shelter system like Shelter Board and YWCA and YMCA. And we have those that are on the investment side like Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing and Finance Fund. Fewer members, but a growing contingent who do highly vulnerable populations that kind of cross into housing. So for instance, The Refuge is a program on the west side of Columbus that helps people who are struggling with substance abuse recovery to get clean and sober and back to their lives.
Your question?
How do you interact with and or relate to Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority?
They are one of our members.
You're a member.
Bob Bitzenhofer is our vice chair right now. I particularly like working with them. I love all of my members equally. They're my children, right? But CMHA, I think, is a really wonderful relationship because the scale of housing that they're able to do, the number of households they're able to affect, being able to look inside their data and see trends, they're kind of a canary in the coal mine for things that are coming because they have such a large slice of Franklin County that they can look into.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, moving on to items from the Director of Finance. Got two ordinances.
One ordinance and one resolution.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
We'll start with the ordinance. So late July, we received the first tranche of the ARPA funds. And the first thing that we looked at was our loss in revenue. That's part of the parameters that surround the use of the funds. So they had a very, not too complex, but a calculation to use to determine what your revenue would have been based on the last 3 years, the average growth. And you were able to use the larger of your average growth, or 4.1%. So our average growth from 2017 through 2019 was about 10%. So we were able to use that larger number. Then you apply that to your base year, which for us was 2019, and roughly around 3.5 million is the calculated loss in revenue. So I went back to the directors, back to the departments to see what did you forego coming into the 2021 budget based on where we were in 2020 and where we were anticipated to be in 2021. So in there are a couple things. Part of it was for a reduction to professional development, and then there were a handful of things all related to information technology, the new communication center, and public safety. So totaling for 2021, those things that were forgone that we felt needed to be replenished, asking for a supplemental in the amount of $186,000. Moving forward, we're looking at all the requirements under the ARPA. There's a lot of things that the funding could be used for. The spirit is to really boost the economy and really help those that were most impacted. So we're going to be working closely with the finance chair to talk about those projects that we see. There's no intention to use this for ongoing operations. Obviously, we do not want to bank on funding that's going to be a one-time. So we're going to be looking for those projects and items that are one-time in nature as we move forward, determining how we're going to spend these dollars. We do have 4 years to obligate it, so we have time to look and see what our needs are and how we could really meet the spirit of the act. Any questions on the supplemental request?
Does this need to be, I forget, does this need to be a, did you ask for emergency on this?
No. No
Okay.
need for emergency. It could just go through
Okay.
normal legislation.
All right. Everybody okay with this on the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, so this will be, okay.
This is for the resolution or the ordinance, or
This
both?
is for the ordinance, the supplemental.
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll be on the, okay, so that'll be on the consent agenda. Next item.
Let's transfer.
So the next item is to transfer appropriations in the CARES fund. So we're kind of winding down and getting to the last of that funding that we received in 2020. One thing that was identified are the chairs here in chambers. They're cloth. Does not make it very easy to sanitize and clean to minimize the spread of the virus. So there's some funding that was already appropriated. This is the last little piece that we have to transfer, the $5,600, so we can meet the full cost of the replacement of the chamber chairs. So we're requesting a transfer of $5,600 from tech services to materials and supplies.
Any questions?
Have dais chairs been factored into that as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Tall ones. Taller one. Can we pick them out?
What color are you going to get?
Green.
Not green.
I believe they're black with silver casters, and they should be here before mid-September.
Those chairs will be black with silver casters? Oh, ours. Okay.
No, these ones will be. I believe yours are all black.
They're all black?
Like they are now?
These ones in the audience will be black with
Okay.
silver casters, kind of like these ones are, and then yours are all black.
Okay.
I'll take the Herman Miller Aeron chair for up here. That'd be great. Thank you.
When you say, Miranda, when you say casters, they are stackable though, right? They're not actual wheels.
No wheels, and they're coming with carts that can be easily moved, so Adam
s-
doesn't.
stackable
Yeah.
and- okay.
So that way we can set as many as we want or reduce the amount as
Perfect.
COVID continues.
What's happening to the ones that are here now?
They're being removed by the furniture company.
And where are they, I mean, are we going to sell them, or are we going to? put
We
them
paid
other
for
places?
removal for the furniture company to do that. So they'll go out with the new ones. The contract, or not the contractor, King Business is removing them and discarding of them.
Just discarding them when there's people that are, living. Never mind. It's fine.
Anything else on the chairs?
I want 3.
I'll let
or
Crystal
4.
know when they are
3 or
arriving.
4.
Okay.
I should get a call this week for delivery.
All right, any other questions about the, okay, so, on the consent agenda, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be consent. Thank you. Okay, next from the Director of Public Service.
Good evening, everyone.
Could you just wait? This is, the ordinance will not be on the consent agenda. It'll be no need to come back. It'll be on for first reading, correct? And then no need to come back, and then on the consent agenda the following time, correct? Okay, I just want to make sure I said that kind of, okay, thank you. Sorry, Grant.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. The first item we have for you this evening is a request to enter into contract for smoke and dye testing services as part of the sanitary sewer evaluation survey. As you all remember, back in spring of 2020, we had 2 very severe rainfall events that led to a significant number of water and basement reports that included some raw sewage. The city initiated SSES survey immediately after. That was based on flow monitoring and creating a sanitary sewer model. While that is still ongoing, there has been a preliminary recommendation to do direct testing in roughly 30% of the survey area. That direct testing will include smoke and dye testing to collect data that'll be used to identify sources of significant rainfall, infiltration, and inflow. The city sought an RFP for this testing, and the vendor was selected through that RFP process. Once the testing has been completed, we will be seeking proposals from a consultant to analyze that data and provide recommendations. So we are respectfully requesting to enter into contract with EMH&T for the smoke and dye testing services. In order to complete this project in 2020, or move this project forward in 2021, I apologize, and utilize the traditionally drier months of August and September, we will be requesting an emergency and waiver.
Any questions? Karen?
Grant, we've had a whole lot of rain just the past week, let's say. Were there any of those same ones that had the sewage in the basement or water in the basement? Was there any of that happened?
Thankfully, we did not receive any reports of water in basements from those past events this year.
Had they checked out or had they changed things in terms of making sure that everything was done correctly?
So the flow monitors remain in the sewers, and they did capture the sewer's response to the rainfall events. However, the intensity or the severity of them were not as substantial as the ones in 2020.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No problem.
Just as much a comment, Mr. Moorhead and I have been in dialogue with regard to a commercial property over in the commercial district that if I've gathered from all the conversations, the first time the building has had an infiltration was this year with the water that came on Tuesday.
Yeah, that was localized heavy rainfall towards the industrial zone. Some of you may have heard of Reynoldsburg's impact from that storm. They received, I think, well over 5 inches in a number of hours, and they had significant flooding throughout. And that's part of that eastern area where that storm definitely hit harder, whereas the western portion of the city didn't get as much rainfall as the eastern portion did.
I think it was Blacklick, too, that had,
It would be, yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen the
Blackwood.
water meter readings,
Yeah.
or whatever the terminology is.
the storm this last week was very variable across even the city of Gahanna, where
Yes.
on the western sides, we received, a hard summer rain, but on the eastern side of the city, we got very heavy rainfall. And the property that you're referring to in the industrial zone, it wasn't a water and basement situation where water came back up through the sewers. In this case, the area flooded enough that it actually flowed overland directly into their doors.
Yes.
And led to flooding.
My daughter-in-law, they live in Farm Creek, and she has a rain gauge, and it was 7.5 inches
Wow.
on Tuesday. So
Yeah. Wow.
it was a lot of rain.
Yeah, and we had rain on Monday as well. So I
Yes.
know some of the reports showed maybe 2 or so inches on Monday and then 5 inches on Tuesday.
Well, she
So-
emptied hers before Tuesday, so. Any other questions? Okay, so this will be on a regular agenda for second reading, or waiving second reading and declared emergencies.
No, I think we could do it on.
What?
Just
Think
consent.
it could go on the consent agenda?
Not with the word waiver of emergency.
Okay, so regular agenda.
Oh.
All right. Next, 0052-2021.
The next item we have is a request to award a contract for the 2021 to 2023 Sidewalk Maintenance Program administration and inspection. So following the adoption of Gahanna's ordinances that support the Sidewalk Maintenance Program, we're seeking authorization to enter into contract with EMH&T for the development of the supporting documents and administration of the 2021 to 2023 Sidewalk Maintenance Program. In addition, they'll do other items such as preparing standard inspection documents, public outreach documents that can be used for this program as well as future years' programs. It is a 3-year contract with the option for 3 separate 1-year renewals. We are requesting a waiver in emergency, which will allow us to provide residents with the adequate time to opt in and opt out of the program in 2021 and complete the necessary repairs prior to bidding the sidewalk construction.
Any questions? Jamie?
So refresh my memory, opting in and opting out of something this year is for construction next year.
Correct. You have the option to opt in to the program, or you can opt out and complete the repairs yourself.
Okay. So if we're talking about improvements or construction for next year, why the waiver of emergency again?
Because the amount of time that it takes to go through the entire process, once we authorize the contractor has to go out, EMH&T, survey all the sidewalk. We also have to set the program area, provide the residents time to opt in and opt out, and then we have winter, and then have to provide them adequate time to actually do the construction if they want to opt out.
Didn't we approve money for this program for this year?
Correct.
So why hasn't the study been done yet?
The inspection work has been completed in these areas that we expect the program area to be for 2021. That work occurred over 2019 and 2020. The money that was encumbered for this year is the construction dollars that will support a bid for this upcoming work as well as this contract. So this contract itself is not just the construction, inspection, and administration of the capital sidewalk maintenance program. It's also assistance in developing the documents that will serve that program in the years going forward. So one of the timelines we're trying to hit here is getting the notifications to residents and the mailers that will be going out along with the sidewalk program drafted and completed, so we can take the first initial step of seeking a program area through council in the coming months.
So no sidewalk got built this year under this program?
Correct. Residents will be notified of sidewalk maintenance needs, but owing to the timeline of adopting the code for the sidewalk maintenance program, we won't be able to actually construct sidewalk through a capital project this year. We'll hit the winter months before we have time to do concrete work.
Okay, go ahead.
Just point of clarification. It is opt-in or it is opt-out? Which is it?
Opt-out.
Thank you.
Yes.
It
You
is
are
only an opt-out program.
correct. Once the program area is adopted, according to the Sidewalk Program Code, it is effective on all properties within that program area, and the residents have the option to opt out of the program and seek their own repairs and maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this waiver of second and emergency, so this will be on the regular agenda too. All right, okay, thank you. Next.
So the final item we have for you this evening is a request to award a contract for the emergency repairs of the Granville Street signals. As you may remember, the 5 signal pole foundations were found to have structural deficiencies earlier this year. Bids were opened and reviewed on August 12th. In total, we received 4 bids. Miller Cable Company was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So we recommend awarding the base bid and the alternate bid for signal head replacement to Miller Cable. We did previously seek a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $175,000 in May to fund these emergency repairs. At that time, we did note that the additional funds might need to be requested once bids were received. Based on the bid opening, there is a need to request additional supplemental in the amount of $122,439.41, and that's to cover construction, contingency, inspection, and costs that are already incurred for those emergency repairs. And of course, we are requesting a waiver in emergency to complete these emergency repairs.
Any questions?
Regular agenda. No questions.
Questions? I had a couple. How did you determine, what caused you to look at that they were, how did you determine they were failing? I know this goes back a ways. I just was thinking about it and wondered how.
There was a signal improvement occurring at the intersection of Granville Street and Lincoln Circle, and our contractor that was conducting the work noticed that the foundations had structural deficiencies. So we inspected those foundations as well as other foundations on Granville Street as they were all installed as part of the same project roughly 20 years ago, and found that the same issue occurred at 4 other foundations, or 5 total foundations.
They had, usually concrete gets harder as it gets older. Why did this fail? I know 20 years is a long time, but it seems like for concrete projects, it's not that long.
This is in regards to the mounting hardware. There were some modifications completed to the mounting bolts in the foundations that thereby made it structurally deficient.
Okay, all right. And they'll do something different this time, right?
Yes, so the foundations will be completely replaced or repaired if they cannot complete a replacement for whatever reason.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. That will be on regular agenda also, since it's a waiver of second and emergency. Okay, thank you. Discussion items, the ward boundaries.
Crystal and I have been catching up on the data and the information that's available. The MORPC information that had been expected is still pending, is what I understand. And I believe our GIS group is also working on a map from that data, just as an additional picture. And we'll pursue further from there.
Okay. And council communication?
So, and actually, I've got notes on a couple of different things too, in addition, if we can. But with regard to communication, one of the things Crystal and I have been talking about is how to enhance communication from council, tools and resources that are available, potential costs, and most importantly, how do we maintain information and provide information that is informative of general activities of council, and yet also keep those communications evergreen. One of the concerns is making sure that we don't overexpand, I should say, constant communication paths and limit and be challenged with appropriate content of what's occurring in council. The focus here is general communication of activities, our schedule, our committees, budget as an example, and publishing that information, and similar. There is an upcoming e-newsletter. Crystal and I are working on getting communication out with regards, certainly with budget and any other activities that are coming, and being prepared to do that with the upcoming newsletter. And then, depending on what makes sense from a content standpoint, pursuing additional items from there. To that end, we've got a couple of other items. One is, we've talked about communications, we talked about, coffee. Crystal has been working to identify locations and dates for Coffee with Council. What I've asked her to do is pursue monthly, since it has been almost a year and a half since we've been able to do Coffee with Council. And then for next year, we'll determine whatever the next year's path is at a later date. And then boards and commissions. Another item that Crystal and the council office has been working on is an online format for people to apply. We've gone over preliminary question and processes, and we'll have a draft of those questions back out to council for any additional items that council may want to have on that, and then we'll move that forward to get, not input, but to get respondents for our open seats and to pursue our next offices.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
The initial newsletter, when is that anticipated to be ready, go out? And is that just, it just sounds like it's just going to be kind of sort of basic scheduling types of items at this
Yes.
point?
It's a monthly newsletter,
When do you think the first one is going to go out?
September.
And we're doing that on email or?
Yeah, it's submitted by the Marketing and Communications Department each month. It's just going to be a part of the city newsletter.
Okay.
anything else?
So that'll be through the Gov delivery system that's in place? Okay, all right.
Okay. Well, seeing nothing else, we're adjourned.